The executioner's blade hung 3 inches above Marcus Chen's neck when the throne room doors exploded inward. He didn't flinch. After 7 months in a Vel'kari prison, he'd forgotten how. "Halt the execution." The voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a plasma torch through hull plating. Marcus couldn't see who spoke. His head was locked in the ceremonial restraint, eyes forced downward at the polished obsidian floor. But he heard the collective intake of breath from 500 Vel'kari nobles. He heard armor plates clicking as the Imperial guard shifted nervously. And he heard footsteps. Deliberate. Unhurried. The click of heeled boots on stone growing closer. "Your Radiance," the High Adjudicator's voice trembled. "This human has been sentenced by the Tribunal of 7. The execution proceeds under Article." "I know what article, Adjudator. I wrote half of them." The female voice was closer now, perhaps 10 feet away. "Release the restraint." "Your Radiance, with deepest respect, even you cannot." I said release him. Silence. Then the magnetic locks disengaged with a hiss, and Marcus slowly raised his head. She stood before the execution platform in full Imperial regalia. The Empress Selyara Val Thorn, ruler of 11 star systems and commander of the largest fleet in the known galaxy. Her skin held the distinctive silver-blue luminescence of Vel'kari royalty, and her eyes, those famous eyes that had stared down admirals and broken treaties, were the color of burning copper. She was looking directly at him. "This human," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "is no longer subject to tribunal authority." The High Adjudicator stepped forward, his ceremonial robe swishing. "Your Radiance, the crime of espionage against the Empire carries mandatory. He is no longer subject to tribunal authority," Selyara repeated, "because in 1 hour he will be my husband." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at her. The Empress, the most powerful being in 3 sectors, had just claimed him. A maintenance engineer from a human cargo vessel. A man who'd been arrested for being in the wrong corridor at the wrong time, whose espionage consisted of accidentally seeing a shipping manifest he shouldn't have. "Your Radiance." The Adjudicator looked physically ill. "You cannot be serious. Do I appear to be joking, Adjudicator Vel'ran?" Her copper eyes hadn't left Marcus's face. "The Imperial consort is exempt from all criminal proceedings. This is not new law. It has stood for 6,000 years. But he is human. I am aware of his species. The noble houses will never—" "The noble houses," Selyara cut him off, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Rejected 47 marriage candidates I have presented over the past decade. 47 sons and daughters of their own houses, deemed unsuitable for one political reason or another. They have made it abundantly clear that no Vel'kari will ever be acceptable." She smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "So I have chosen someone who is not Vel'kari." The murmuring began. It built like a wave, washing through the assembled nobles, a mixture of outrage, confusion, Marcus noted with surprise, something almost like grudging amusement from a few quarters. "The human has not agreed," the Adjudicator tried, grasping at procedure. "Consent must be human." The Empress addressed him directly for the first time. "You have a choice. Death in the next few minutes, or marriage to me. I will not pretend either option is particularly appealing, but one does offer significantly more longevity." Marcus's throat was dry. His wrists were still raw from the restraints. He'd spent 7 months preparing himself to die, and now this. "Why?" he managed. Something flickered in those copper eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that he would question rather than immediately accept. "Because I require a consort who owes nothing to any noble house, who has no political debts, and who has no expectations of power." She paused. "And because you looked at me, What?" "During your trial. Every other being in that chamber looked at the floor when I entered. You looked directly at my face." The corner of her mouth twitched. "Either you are very brave, or very stupid. Either quality is more interesting than what I have found among my own people." The executioner still stood behind Marcus, blade ready. The Adjudicator was beginning to recover his composure, his eyes calculating, searching for another legal avenue to challenge this. The nobles whispered and plotted in their seats. And the Empress of 11 star systems waited for the answer of a human maintenance engineer, who had nothing to offer her except the fact that he wasn't afraid to meet her eyes. "My execution date was set," Marcus said slowly. "The alien Empress married me 1 hour before." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I guess that's going to be a story. Is that a yes?" Marcus looked at her, really looked. Past the regalia and the power and the political calculation. He saw exhaustion carefully hidden. Loneliness worn like armor. And beneath it all, a desperate gamble disguised as imperial decree. He recognized that desperation. He'd felt it himself, in his cell, in the long nights when he'd thought about his sister back on Earth who would never know what happened to him, about the life he'd never live. "Yes," he said. "That's a yes." The ceremony was brief, efficient, and utterly without romance. Marcus stood in a side chamber of the throne room, dressed in hastily procured formal robes that didn't quite fit his human frame. A Vel'kari priest rattled off words in Old Imperial that Marcus didn't understand, while Selyara stood beside him with the expression of someone completing a particularly tedious administrative task. When the priest indicated he should speak, Marcus said, "I do," because that seemed universal enough. When the binding cords were placed around their wrists, a Vel'kari tradition, he would later learn, Selyara's hand was cool against his. She didn't look at him. And then, it was done. "You will be taken to the consort's quarters," she told him afterward, her voice formal, distant. "Remain there until summoned. Do not speak to anyone. Do not leave for any reason." She paused. "Do you understand?" "Perfectly." She studied him for a moment, as if checking for sarcasm and finding none. Then she swept out of the chamber without another word. Marcus was escorted by 4 guards to a suite of rooms larger than any apartment he'd ever lived in. The door sealed behind him with a definitive click. Not locked, he discovered when he tested it, but guards stood on the other side. The message was clear enough. He explored his gilded prison. Sleeping chamber with a bed designed for Vel'kari physiology. Slightly too long, slightly too firm. Bathing room with fixtures he didn't recognize. A study with a terminal that was locked to basic functions. And windows, real windows, overlooking the capital city. After 7 months of windowless cells, Marcus stood at that window until his legs ached, watching the alien sun set over spires of crystal and steel. 3 days passed. Food arrived through a service slot. The terminal offered entertainment in languages he didn't speak. He exercised in the small space available, did push-ups until his arms shook, tried to remember the meditation techniques his sister had taught him years ago. He did not see the Empress. On the 4th day, a servant appeared, the first living being he'd interacted with since the ceremony. "The Empress requests your presence at the evening meal," the servant announced, clearly uncomfortable delivering the message. "You will be dressed appropriately." Dressed meant being measured, prodded, and clothed in formal robes that actually fit this time. His hair was cut in what he assumed was an appropriate style. His face was subjected to something that might have been alien makeup, or might have been some kind of ceremonial marking. He couldn't tell. When he was finally deemed presentable, he was led through corridors of increasing grandeur until he reached a private dining chamber. Selyara was already seated. Without the full Imperial regalia, she looked different. Smaller, somehow. The silver-blue luminescence of her skin was dimmer in the soft lighting, and she wore simple robes of deep burgundy. She was reading something on a datapad, and she didn't look up when he entered. Marcus stood awkwardly until a servant gestured to the chair across from her. He sat. Silence stretched between them. "The noble houses are in an uproar," Selyara said finally, still not looking up. "House Vel'kari has formally protested. House Maranov has recalled their ambassador. 4 assassination attempts have been intercepted in the past 3 days." She set down the datapad. "Congratulations. You are now the most hated being in the Empire. Only 4 assassination attempts. I'm almost insulted." That got her attention. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than cold calculation in her expression. Surprise, perhaps. Or the beginning of curiosity. "You make jokes. Survival mechanism. 7 months in prison, you either learn to laugh or you lose your mind." He paused. "Some would say I lost my mind anyway, agreeing to marry an alien empress. Would you prefer the executioner?" "I'd prefer to know why I'm here." Marcus leaned forward. "The real reason. Not the political theater about choosing someone outside the noble houses." Selyara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, quieter, wearier. "Because I am dying." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What? A genetic condition. Rare among my people, but not unknown. The royal bloodline has carried it for generations." She spoke clinically, as if discussing someone else. "I have perhaps 5 years, perhaps less. The noble houses know, which is why they have been so cooperative in rejecting every marriage candidate. If I die without a consort, without an heir, the succession becomes," she smiled thinly, "complicated. Profitable for some. And marrying me solves that how? It doesn't solve anything. It delays. It complicates their plans. And it gives me—" She stopped, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. 5 years is a long time to be alone. Marcus thought about his cell. The silence. The way darkness had become his only companion. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." The food arrived. Dishes he didn't recognize, some of which he wasn't entirely sure were meant to be eaten. Selyara watched him navigate the meal with something that might have been amusement. "You don't know which utensil to use. I don't know what half of this is. The blue one is ceremonial. Don't eat it unless you want to spend the night in the medical bay." He set down his fork. "You could have mentioned that earlier. I wanted to see if you would figure it out." The corner of her mouth twitched, the closest he'd seen her come to a genuine smile. "You didn't. But you also didn't pretend you knew what you were doing. That's unusual. Where I come from, pretending gets you killed faster than ignorance. Where you come from?" She leaned back. "Tell me about it." "Earth. Humans died. The things the intelligence reports don't cover." So he told her. About growing up in the Shanghai reclamation zone, where the sea had taken half the city and humanity was slowly taking it back. About his sister Lynn, who had wanted to be a doctor and ended up as a water engineer because that's what they needed. About the cargo ship that had been his ticket to the stars, the dream of sending money home, the accident that had stranded him in Vel'kari space. Selyara listened without interrupting. Her copper eyes never left his face. "You miss her," she said when he finished. "Your sister, every day. I had a brother once." The words came slowly, as if she was unaccustomed to speaking them. "He died in the succession wars. 18 years ago. I was not supposed to inherit. I was the spare. The afterthought." She looked away. "And now I am the last of my line, and I will die without continuing it. And everything he fought for will have been for nothing. Is that why you haven't tried to find a cure? Given up?" Her eyes snapped back to him, and for a moment he saw the Empress, the one who commanded fleets and broke treaties. "Who says I've given up? The way you talk about it. Like it's already done. It is already done. The finest physicians in 11 systems have. Have you tried human doctors?" She stared at him. "Human medicine is primitive. Your species has barely achieved. My species has been fighting impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees." Marcus held her gaze. "We're really good at refusing to die." The silence stretched between them again, but it felt different this time. Less like a wall, more like a bridge being tentatively constructed. "You are either very brave," Selyara said finally, "or very stupid. You said that before. I am beginning to suspect it may be both." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, the first real one in months. And after a moment, something in Selyara's expression softened. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will be presented to the Imperial court. They will try to humiliate you. They will question your worth, your species, your right to stand beside me. They will be cruel in ways you cannot imagine. And what should I do?" She considered this. "Survive. And that's all I ask. Just survive. I can do that." He paused. "I've had practice." The Imperial court was a blood sport, dressed in silk. Marcus had thought he was prepared. He'd spent the night studying protocols, memorizing the names and faces of the major houses, practicing the formal phrases Selyara had taught him. None of it mattered. From the moment he entered the great hall at her side, he was prey. The nobles circled with their words like predators, their questions designed to wound, their compliments sharpened into daggers. How fascinating that humans can survive without proper luminescence. "Tell me, is it true your species evolved from primates? The consort's robes are lovely. Almost one couldn't tell they were designed for a civilized being. I understand humans mate for life. How quaint. Like the lesser beasts." Marcus smiled, and nodded, and said nothing. He let the insults wash over him like water, the way he'd let the silence wash over him in his cell. Selyara watched him from her throne, her expression unreadable. The first week was the worst. Then the second. By the third, Marcus had learned which nobles were genuinely hostile and which were simply following fashion. He'd learned who might become allies, or at least neutral parties. He'd learned the complex dance of court politics, where a misplaced word could start wars and a well-timed silence could save empires. And slowly, carefully, he'd learned about his wife. She was brilliant, genuinely, frighteningly brilliant. She spoke 12 languages, had memorized treaty law going back millennia, and could calculate orbital mechanics in her head. She was also exhausted, isolated, and deeply, profoundly lonely. They began taking meals together regularly. At first, it was formal, stilted, two strangers sharing space. But gradually, walls came down. Selyara complained about Admiral Vel'kari's incompetence. Marcus told her about the time he'd accidentally vented the cargo hold on his first ship. She taught him to read Vel'kari script. He taught her to play poker. "You're cheating," she accused one evening, studying her cards with copper eyes that had started to warm when they looked at him. "I'm bluffing. There's a difference. The difference being, cheating is breaking the rules. Bluffing is using the rules to tell a different truth." She considered this. Humans have a very flexible relationship with truth. Humans have a very flexible relationship with survival. The nights grew longer as they talked. About politics, philosophy, the nature of duty. About her brother, who had been kind. About his sister, who had been strong. About the weight of expectation and the loneliness of command. One night, 3 months into their strange marriage, Marcus found Selyara in the observatory, staring at the stars. "I received the latest medical report," she said without turning. "The progression is accelerating." He moved to stand beside her. "How long?" 3 years, perhaps less." The stars burned cold and distant through the transparent dome. Somewhere out there, Earth spun on, unaware of the politics and poisons of alien empires. "Come with me tomorrow," Marcus said. She turned. "Where?" "The human district. The medical center there. I've been making inquiries, quietly. There's a doctor, a geneticist who's been working on cross-species adaptation. She thinks..." He paused. "She thinks there might be something worth trying. A human doctor." Selyara's voice was flat, working in a slum district. "This is your great hope? My great hope is that someone who has nothing to lose might see something that everyone with everything to lose has missed." She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, "Why do you care?" It was a genuine question. He could hear it in her voice, the real uncertainty, the genuine confusion. "Because you saved my life," he said. "Because you're brilliant and lonely, and you deserve better than waiting to die alone. Because..." He stopped, surprised by his own honesty. "Because somewhere along the way, I started giving a damn." Selyara stared at him. The luminescence of her skin seemed to pulse faintly. Something he'd learned indicated strong emotion among her people. "You are a very strange human, Marcus Chen. And you're a very strange empress." He held out his hand. "Come with me tomorrow, please." She looked at his extended hand for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, her cool fingers intertwined with his. She didn't let go. The human district was everything the Imperial palace was not. Crowded, chaotic, alive with the messy vitality of a species that didn't know how to give up. Marcus led Selyara through streets that smelled of strange food and stranger chemicals, past shops selling jury-rigged technology, and bars playing music from 100 worlds. She had disguised herself, dimming her luminescence through some technique Marcus didn't understand, wearing simple clothes that hid her identity. She looked around with the wide eyes of someone seeing something truly new. "This is how they live? Your people? Some of them. The ones who ended up here by accident or desperation." He guided her around a group of children playing some incomprehensible game. "Humanity's good at making homes out of nothing." Dr. Sarah Okonkwo's clinic was in a converted warehouse, staffed by volunteers and powered by scavenged generators. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she showed no particular deference when Marcus introduced his wife. "I've reviewed the data you sent," she said, all business. "The condition is similar to some human mitochondrial disorders. Not identical, but similar enough that our research might apply." "Similar?" Selyara's voice was carefully controlled. "The finest Vel'kari physicians have studied this for generations. The finest Vel'kari physicians have been looking at it as a Vel'kari problem." Dr. Okonkwo pulled up holographic displays. "I'm looking at it as a problem. Different perspective." The examination took hours. Marcus waited outside, pacing, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. When Selyara finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. "Well," he asked. "She wants to try something. A treatment protocol adapted from human therapy." Selyara's voice was strange. "She says it might add years. Maybe decades. She says it might not work at all. But there's a chance? There's a chance." Marcus felt something release in his chest that he hadn't known was wound tight. That's all we needed. A chance. Selyara looked at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, there were tears in her copper eyes. Vel'kari tears, silver and luminescent, sliding down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much about keeping me alive?" He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His thumb brushed away a tear, feeling the cool wetness against his skin. "Because you're worth keeping," he said. "Because under all the armor and the politics, there's someone who deserved better than being used as a pawn by people who should have protected her. Because..." He struggled for words. "Because I see you, Selyara. Not the Empress. You..." She kissed him. It was awkward and clumsy and perfect. Their first real kiss, there in the shabby waiting room of a refugee clinic, surrounded by the sounds and smells of humanity at its most resilient. When they finally broke apart, she was trembling. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. There was never time, never trust. We'll figure it out." He held her hands in his. Together. That's the human way. The human way. She almost smiled. "Is that what we're calling this? Got a better name?" She considered. "Not yet. But I'm working on it." The attack came 3 days later. Marcus was in the consort's quarters when the explosion shook the palace. Guards burst in, shouting in Vel'kari too fast for him to follow. He caught enough. Assassination. Empress. Medical wing. He ran. The medical wing was chaos. Smoke screaming, guards firing at shadows. Marcus pushed through it all, guided by instinct and terror, until he found her. Selyara was on the ground, 2 guards dead beside her, a third wounded and trying to drag her to cover. Blood. Silver Vel'kari blood. Soaked her robes. An assassin stood over her, blade raised for the killing stroke. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. He hit the assassin at full speed, human muscle, and human desperation against Vel'kari precision. The blade cut his arm to the bone as they went down. They rolled, grappling, and Marcus's hand found a piece of debris. Sharp, heavy. The assassin stopped moving. Marcus crawled to Selyara. She was conscious. Barely. Her copper eyes flickering. "Marcus, I'm here. I'm here. Help is coming. The treatment." She coughed, and silver blood flecked her lips. "I was going to tell you. It's working. You can tell me later. Stay with me. I'm trying." Her hand found his, grip weak. "I'm trying." The guards arrived. Medics. Someone pulled Marcus away as they worked on her, and he fought them until someone sedated him. The last thing he saw being Selyara's pale face and the silver blood everywhere. He woke in a medical bay, his arm bandaged, his head pounding. "She's alive." The voice belonged to an older Vel'kari woman with the same copper eyes as Selyara. Her aunt, Marcus remembered. Lady Mirith. One of the few family members who hadn't openly opposed the marriage. The blade nicked an artery. Lady Mirith continued. "Another minute, she would have bled out. Your intervention saved her life. I need to see her. You need to rest. I need to see my wife." Lady Mirith studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face seemed to decide something. "This way." Selyara was awake when he reached her room. Pale, bandaged, but awake. And when she saw him, something in her expression cracked open. "You're an idiot," she said. "You could have been killed. So could you. I'm the Empress. Assassination attempts are an occupational hazard. And I'm your husband." Marcus crossed to her bed, took her hand. "Which means your occupational hazards are my occupational hazards. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works." He sat on the edge of the bed. "You saved my life in that throne room. Did you think that came without obligations? I thought it was a political arrangement." It was. And then it wasn't. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Somewhere between the poker lessons and the trips to the human district, it became something else, at least for me. Selyara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion she was clearly unused to expressing. "The assassin was from House Vel'kari. The investigation is ongoing, but we have enough evidence to act." She paused. "I'm going to destroy them. Legally, is there another way? There's usually a more violent way. I considered it." Her grip on his hand tightened. "But you've been teaching me about the human approach. Using the rules to tell a different truth." She almost smiled. "House Vel'kari has been embezzling from the treasury for decades. I have proof. By the time I'm done, they'll wish I'd simply executed them. That's my girl." She laughed, actually laughed, a sound Marcus had heard only a handful of times. "Is that what I am now? If you want to be." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Selyara's copper eyes searched his face. "Okonkwo's treatment," she said. "The preliminary results are remarkable. She thinks I might have decades now. Decades. Then we'll fill them. With what? Everything. Politics and poker. Human districts. And palace intrigue. Arguments about which utensils to use." He leaned closer. "Whatever you want. Whatever we want. And if I want..." She hesitated. "The succession laws require an heir. I never considered it possible before, but if the treatment continues to work, cross-species compatibility is complicated," Marcus acknowledged. "But humans have been solving complicated problems since we figured out how to make fire. You think it's possible? I think nothing has been impossible since an alien empress decided to marry a maintenance engineer 1 hour before his execution. Selyara pulled him down and kissed him, gentle and fierce at once. When they parted, she kept her forehead pressed to his. I love you, she said, and the words sounded like a confession, like a revelation. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, Marcus Chen. My very strange human husband. I love you too. He brushed her hair back from her face. My very strange Empress wife. The Imperial court convened 6 months later. Marcus stood beside Selyara's throne, wearing robes that finally fit properly, bearing the ceremonial marks of a recognized consort. The nobles who had mocked him now bowed. The houses that had plotted against him now sought his favor. House Vel'kari was gone, dissolved, their assets seized, their members scattered. The message had been received throughout the empire. The Empress was no longer alone. The Human District Expansion Bill, Selyara announced, will proceed as drafted. The medical exchange program with Earth will begin next quarter. And the Succession Council will meet to discuss the preliminary findings regarding interspecies inheritance laws. Murmurs rippled through the court. Interspecies inheritance. The implications were clear. After the session, in their private quarters, Marcus found Selyara standing at the window, looking out at the capital city. They're going to fight us, she said. The traditionalists. The purists. Every step forward will be a battle. Good thing we're both stubborn. She turned to face him. In the years since their marriage she had changed, subtly, but significantly. The exhaustion had faded from her eyes. The loneliness had been replaced by something warmer. Dr. Okonkwo sent her latest report, Selyara said. The treatment is fully successful. I have a normal lifespan now. She paused. She also sent preliminary research on the other matter. Marcus's heart stuttered. And theoretically with some genetic modification. Selyara's copper eyes were bright. It's possible. Difficult, but possible. Marcus crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her. She leaned into him, her cool skin against his warmth. We're really doing this, he said. Building something new. We're really doing this. She looked up at him. A human and a Vel'kari, ruling an empire, possibly raising children that shouldn't exist. The most stubborn species in the galaxy meeting the most powerful. He grinned. The universe doesn't stand a chance. Selyara laughed, and the sound was bright and free and full of hope. No, she agreed. It really doesn't. Outside the window, the alien sun set over the capital city, painting the spires in shades of gold and copper. Somewhere on Earth, Chen was reading the first official letter from her brother in over 2 years, learning that he was alive and married and somehow impossibly happy. And in the palace, an empress and her consort watched the stars emerge, their hands intertwined, their future unwritten. It had started with an execution. It had continued with a desperate gamble. And it had become something neither of them had expected, something that would change not just their lives, but the relationship between their species forever. My execution date was set. The alien empress married me 1 hour before. And somehow, against all odds, it was the beginning of everything. The end.